She is a young woman who was left blind in an accident when she was a child. She and her husband, James, an insurance agent, live in Van Gogh and have been happily married for a short while. The couple is trying to have a baby, but Gina also hasn't given up hope of regaining her sight. One day, the couple goes to see Dr. Hughes for a routine checkup. Once the tests are finished, the doctor announces that he can operate on the young woman's right eye and thereby partially restore her sight. She will have to receive a cornea transplant, undergo reconstruction of the iris, and have a lens implant placed, promising that she will recover about 40% of her vision in 1 month. The couple puts themselves on the waiting list and returns home, where Gina continues her normal routine, preparing for a talent show with her neighbor, the little girl Lucy, and learning Thai. One day she asks her husband if he has grown bored of taking care of her, and the man replies that the important thing is that she needs him. Another day at the pool, Daniel greets Gina. She knows who he is but has never actually seen him due to her blindness, and her friend Karen jokes in the shower that if she weren't blind, she could appreciate the young man's huge package. Suddenly, she realizes that Karen is bleeding. Upon returning, Gina witnesses Lucy crying, and the little girl tells her that her mother wants to put their dog Ginger to sleep because the family's about to have a baby, and the dog is simply in the way. Gina can't allow that to happen and decides to keep the dog herself. When James returns home, he accepts Gina's decision to keep Ginger. Then he realizes his wife is sad because once again, she hasn't managed to get pregnant. To cheer Gina up, he takes her out on a date that ends at a nightclub. Gina starts dancing, but James tells her that he thinks all the people dancing look stupid, and if she could see herself now, she would agree with him. These words hurt Gina, and she hurries out, but her husband catches up to her to apologize and walks her to the bathroom. When Gina comes out, the man is no longer by the door, and some strangers start harassing her. Fortunately for her, James returns quickly. The couple goes home, where the dog has caused some trouble, and James is upset while Gina laughs. They receive a call from Dr. Hughes' assistant, telling them there is an opening for the surgery. On the appointed day, James accompanies his wife to the operating room, and under anesthesia, she dreams of the car accident she had with her parents and sister, which caused her to lose her sight. When the young woman wakes up and the time comes to remove the bandage, the operation turns out to be a success, and Gina begins to see little by little. During lunch at the hospital, Gina confesses to her husband that she still hasn't looked at herself in the mirror, and that she had also pictured James differently. The man replies that she is beautiful, but that he is probably not as handsome as she had imagined, to which Gina smiles and says he's actually more handsome in person. At night, she decides to look at herself in the mirror and to gaze upon the city of Van Gogh from her balcony. The next day, Dr. Hughes prescribes several types of eye drops and discharges her. In the taxi, Gina is surprised by how beautiful everything looks and tells James that she wants to see even more colors. James takes his wife to the flower market, and she walks around for quite some time, enjoying what she sees. The apartment is also not how she had pictured it. Finally, she confesses that she was sure she already knew everything, but now realizes that she knows nothing. To please his wife, James gives her tickets to the south of Spain, to the same hotel and room where they spent their honeymoon, and says that afterward, they will travel through the south and then to Barcelona to visit Gina's sister, Carla. The couple makes love, but James suddenly stops and collects a sample, which he later takes to the clinic for analysis. At the airport, Gina asks her husband to buy her a mini camera. When the couple arrives in Spain and checks into a hotel, Gina tells him that they have made a mistake and that it's not the same room as on their honeymoon. James fails to convince her otherwise. Gina also begins to show more independence in other ways. For instance, she refuses to get on a double kayak and asks for 2 single kayaks, then rows well ahead of her husband. That night at the bar, James becomes wary when he sees Gina having a pleasant conversation with the bartender, and Gina tells him the bartender's name is Norman. He and his wife, she says, were the ones given the couple's actual honeymoon suite. James has to admit that the room is not the same and that he had no intention of telling Gina. Back in their room, they see Norman and his wife making love right in front of the panoramic windows. This inspires Gina, and she decides to experiment on the train. Gina ties her husband to the bed, blindfolds him, starts recording, and asks him intimate questions. She confesses that during intimacy, she often has fantasies about other men. James says he's starting to feel silly, gets nervous, and asks her to untie him. In Barcelona, Gina meets up with Carla, her husband Ramon, an artist, and their son Luca. During dinner, Ramon asks when the couple plans to have children and jokes about it, then asks James if it bothers him that Gina can now see, implying that she might find someone more handsome than him. After dinner, Carla leaves with Luca and a friend, and the sisters start getting ready to go out at night, only to be interrupted by Ramon, who walks in wearing a mermaid outfit. When James sees his wife wearing makeup and a sexy dress, he pretends to be amazed, but in reality, he feels embarrassed by it all. Later, the couple agrees they still need to discover who the real Gina is. At the bar, everyone is watching a soccer match, and James feels uncomfortable, to which Ramon comments that James's job as an insurance agent must be very boring. After the bar, Ramon invites everyone to a risque show. The women, already tipsy, accept the proposal, but James says he's not interested and lets his wife go with Carla and Ramon. When the three of them return, Ramon jokingly advises Gina to show her boring husband what she saw along the way. He teases a strange guy. Gina responds aggressively, and James, who has just arrived, tries to calm his wife down and resolve the situation, but in return, she strikes him. In the midst of the chaos, Ramon immediately jumps into the fight, and the stranger leaves. Gina thanks Ramon and gets angry about James's behavior, starting to shout that anyone can approach her and touch her because her husband doesn't care. In bed, James asks Gina why she humiliated him in front of her family. Gina answers that he humiliated himself. They lie down and listen to Carla and Ramon's salsa music from the other room. The next day, they all head to the tunnel, the same place where Gina and her family had the accident years ago. Gina's memories of the day she lost her sight come flooding back. The couple returns to Thailand, and Gina sees for the first time that their windows are directly across from their neighbors. She asks James if they can move, but he disagrees, saying they are happy here, and tries to seduce her. However, she changes the subject and starts throwing out her old, unattractive clothes. That night, James finds the recording Gina made on the train and recalls her words about other men. Noticing that she didn't even look at him at that moment, her face expressionless. He peeks into his wife's room while she's asleep and sees the bottle of eye drops prescribed for her. The next day, he learns that the results of his semen analysis show he could never be a father. While out walking Lucy and Ginger, Gina runs into the same Daniel from the pool, who is also walking a male dog wearing a pink bandana. The young man is very surprised that she can see now and invites her for a coffee, but she declines. Gina returns home with blonde hair, but James does not react the way she had hoped. Angry at his reaction, she tells him she will go alone the next day to see the house she likes. Later, she tells him about the things she saw that day, including the dog with the pink bandana. However, when James jealously asks about the dog's owner, she says the owner is a woman. That night, Gina puts on makeup before dinner, and James asks her to wear something more modest for the party so people won't stare. Gina asks if he loved her more when she was blind. James admits he has the same question and also asks why she chose to go blonde. The next day, Gina goes to see the house and likes it very much. Later, when she and Lucy are rehearsing Gina's song for a contest, her operated eye begins tearing up. Gina uses her eye drops, and James, who has come back home, sees her. Gina confesses that it started hurting and tearing up that morning. Dr. Hughes tells Gina she has a slight inflammation, and as a result, there is a mild rejection of the implant, so he prescribes a higher dose of steroid drops. Back home, Gina takes out the drops but is distracted by a phone call from Carla, leaving the vials on the sink. Worried, her sister says she should stop using the drops if they are only making things worse. Meanwhile, James, while his wife is on the phone, grabs the drop bottles. That night, he watches the video on Gina's tablet again, remembering her words and her blank expression. The next day, Gina realizes her vision has begun to deteriorate again. However, Dr. Hughes repeats that the operation itself was a success and asks if she is applying the steroid drops correctly. Gina says she's doing everything right, but is suspicious about the drops, so she asks him to have them tested. The doctor agrees to send them for analysis and gives her new bottles of the same medication in exchange. That night, the couple goes to a party, but James rushes Gina, and she shouts that she can barely see. He begins to hug her and comfort her, saying that they were also very happy before. The following day, Ginger is feeling ill from the heat due to her age, and Daniel, who happens to be nearby, offers to take the dog to his home to give her some water. Together, Daniel and Gina manage to help the dog. Suddenly, the young man kisses Gina. She seems to enjoy it and does not resist. Meanwhile, James is looking at the house Gina likes and tells the realtor he wants to buy it. Gina returns home at night, and James tells her he's going to buy the house by the river that she loves so much. The next day, Dr. Hughes calls Gina and tells her that the drop test results have arrived. The vials did not contain the medication he had prescribed, just plain water. When Gina returns, she discovers that someone has broken into her apartment and that Ginger is gone. She calls her husband and runs out to look for the dog in the park, where she finds James and Daniel together. Gina approaches, and her husband introduces Daniel, mentioning that he walks his dog here every day and has found Ginger. On the way home, James says he recognizes the dog with the pink bandana and now sees that its owner is a man, adding that he knows Gina has known him for a while. Gina replies that she also knows James does not just go out with his friend after work, and angrily adds that he's probably afraid she might be attracted to Daniel. Yet the next day at the pool, she decides she no longer wants to talk to Daniel and leaves quickly. One night, still unaware that James is sterile, she informs him that she's pregnant. James understands it all but doesn't say anything. Some months later, they move to their new home, and Gina is once again completely blind, now unable to live without her husband's help. Enthusiastically, James helps his wife prepare the nursery, and in the meantime learns that Lucy's mother is taking the girl to the concert that very night, the one Gina and Lucy had been preparing for. James is about to leave, but returns to see if his wife really can't see anything. Gina walks to the edge of the stairs, standing motionless while James silently watches her, face to face. Convinced that she's still blind, James leaves, but now Gina follows him with her eyes. Gina discovers a letter written in a child's handwriting saying that the author found her dog. Meanwhile, James inspects the old apartment and finds several vials of the drops that Dr. Hughes had given to Gina a second time. He realizes that his wife has been secretly using them all along. He rushes home and sees that same letter with a picture of Ginger. The boy who wrote the letter describes seeing a white man tying the dog to a fence and leaving, so he kept the dog. However, he was afraid to write earlier because he'd grown attached to Ginger and worried someone would take her away. The letter goes on to talk about something very special to Gina and James. The boy says he truly believes he should keep the dog because when he looks at her and she looks back at him, that's true love. So he can't return her because he'd be too sad. James arrives at the talent show and sees Gina looking right at him as she performs the song she has spent so long rehearsing with Lucy. It turns out to be directed at him. Gina sings a duet with Lucy, expressing happiness about many things in her life, but above all about being able to see only him. Suddenly, she starts a solo section about saying goodbye, and that from now on they will only be together in her dreams. Overwhelmed with remorse for his possessive attitude and extreme selfishness, James hurries out of the hall. Back at home, Gina sees that James has found the letter she had read earlier and removes her wedding ring. At the same time, her husband is in tears as he drives through the tunnel straight toward a truck, just like Gina's family did. Sometime later, Gina and her newborn baby see each other for the first time,